Hi and welcome. My name is Dr. Giles P. Croft, and I want to share with you today how a struggling professional called Stacey came back from the brink of burnout and was quickly and permanently reconnected to her natural, inbuilt state of health and happiness. Now, this is something that every single one of us has inside of us, even if it doesn't look that way. And so I want to share with you how you can use this same strategy to break habits and addictions, get unstuck, overcome mental health problems, and basically spend more time connected to your own natural state of happiness and well-being. And I'm going to show you how you can do this without the use of any drugs. I don't prescribe medications. Without the need to dredge through a load of painful past experiences, and without having to learn any mental coping techniques or worry about falling off the wagon trying to keep up with time-consuming routines. Stacey didn't have to do any of those things. It was a simple 4-step strategy that we put in place and that she implemented really well that I'm going to tell you about today. And you might relate to Stacey's story because when we met, she described herself as being stressed and anxious most of the time, both at work and when she was with her family. She was very critical of herself and spent a lot of time questioning all of her decisions, deliberating over them for ages, and then worrying about whether or not they'd been the right ones afterwards. She was concerned about what people thought of her. And when we started working together, she confessed to overthinking things constantly. She had a very busy mind. She was worried about stuff that might happen in the future at work and whether or not she was equipped to deal with them. And this left her in a really difficult position that she'd been going back and forth on for a while. Whether or not to stick with the job she was doing. Because she didn't think she could carry on, and yet she just didn't know what to do about that. She'd had a bit of counselling and had tried all the usual things like mindfulness and meditation, but they only ever provided temporary relief, and she was still stuck with her worries and her dilemma. So she was pretty much at the end of her tether when we met, and I want to share with you in this quick presentation the 3 big breakthroughs that Stacey experienced as a result of working through these 4 simple steps. Firstly, she really did reconnect properly to feelings of calm, peacefulness and self-confidence. And it was really good timing for that too, because not long after her working conditions got even worse. But she's maintained that clarity at work, so much so that people really notice and are always asking her how she stays so calm in difficult circumstances. She's become something of a leader on that front, which has been really lovely to see. Because this strategy doesn't involve a bunch of tools and techniques, she's able to help others very easily in the workplace. And this is something I see time and again with clients. They carry around with them such a feeling of presence that it becomes a bit contagious as colleagues and friends naturally start asking questions and getting interested for themselves. So that was her first breakthrough. Her second breakthrough was around relationships, both in work and out of it. So she no longer spends time worrying about what others think of her, and says that she trusts herself to deal with each moment that comes along to the best of her ability, and is much more in touch with her intuition these days. Again, this is something that we all have inside of us. It never goes anywhere, and reconnecting to it is all part of the simple process that we went through together and that you'll go through too. The third breakthrough that really changed everything for Stacey was getting clarity on the big decision she'd been agonising over. Once she'd been through this process I'm going to describe and came out from underneath that cloud of overthinking and second guessing, she saw that she was neither stuck nor powerless. and had the realisation that she really enjoyed her work. I remember her saying not long afterwards that nothing's different, but everything's changed. And this is the real power behind this strategy. The insights we have about how we're experiencing the world are truly life-changing. Now, Stacey stayed, but this isn't to say that everyone who goes through these steps comes to the same conclusions. I have another client who presented with an almost identical situation, but once having gone through this process, he saw truly that his current career was long past its sell-by date and it was time to move on. What these two situations have in common is the way in which both clients became rapidly unstuck in a matter of weeks from something they'd been debating for a long time. So just before we get into the steps that Stacey went through, I want to introduce myself. I'm Giles P. Croft. I'm a psychology graduate and former surgeon in the National Health Service in the UK. I've always had a keen interest in the mechanics of how we work, both body and mind. And over time, working with clients, I've come to appreciate the pivotal role the mind plays in our physical health. My own search for happiness really launched when I left the NHS to gain as much life experience as I could. And I worked first in health informatics before pursuing my passion of cycling for a living, speaking regularly at conferences about career change, and opening a shop with my wife. In retrospect, I was somewhat naively looking for the perfect set of circumstances that I thought would guarantee happiness. Thankfully, I just happened to have huge amounts of fun into the process and went deep into the nuts and bolts of how our psychology works. This led to me having, over the course of a few weeks, while preparing for a talk I'd given dozens of times previously, a series of life-changing realisations about how we experience the world and what we're actually capable of as human beings. All of a sudden, everything just made sense, and years of frankly thinking there was something wrong with me for never seeming to settle just dissolved overnight. I knew instantly that the implications of this understanding reached into every aspect of the human condition, and since then I've had the great fortune to help people overcome lifelong habits, come out from under clouds of worry and anxiety, and permanently resolve feelings from past traumas. It's really rewarding. I now work with clients one-to-one, either online or outdoors in the glorious scenery of the Brecon Beacons National Park where I live, and I run group programs where we go through the steps required to reconnect to health and happiness once and for all. So let's take a look at these 4 steps that Stacey went through, that we all go through on this journey back to well-being, so that you can take something useful away from this short presentation. The very first step was to lay down some foundations, a bit like I'm doing with you now, to open up to the possibility that there's an entirely different way of solving our problems, one that we've never even conceived of before. Because if you're anything like me, before I came across this understanding of why we think, feel and behave the way we do, I really thought I knew how life worked. Frankly, I thought being happy was something that required constant effort. In fact, I had the evidence, because years ago, when I'd got fed up with trying to keep up with a whole bunch of personal development activities, I really felt like my well-being went downhill when I stopped. So step 1 started to open Stacey up to the idea that things weren't as they seemed. Specifically, that there was much less to do than she'd imagined. This approach doesn't prescribe anything. It's what we call subtractive. It peels away some of the misunderstandings we're not even aware we hold. Health and happiness are always there, and in going through these steps, Stacey started to remove the things that got in the way of her connecting to those. In this step, we also looked at the nature of change. Long-lasting personal change doesn't come from working hard at something. It comes from having a complete shift in our understanding of how something works, a totally different perspective on it that we were simply unaware of. Changes like these that come through having insights and realizations or aha moments are rapid and permanent. They don't fade or ever get taken away from you. It's a bit like the first time someone points out to you the arrow that's hidden inside the FedEx logo. Once you've seen it, there's no way to unsee it. There's no trying involved next time you look at that logo. You've had the realisation and it's part of you now. I'll let you go and look that one up in your own time. In step 2, we got into the mechanics of how our minds work, and this really forms the core of the programme. This is where we have innocent misunderstandings to correct. And with Stacey, we started the inquiry along these lines. Now, there are hours of content involved in these 3 questions alone, so this is just an overview, but the essence of this step is to break things right down to their constituent components. In fact, it's here that we learn about the 3 basic elements that make up every human experience. A bit of neuroscience for you. You see, we've all got our own thing going on, be that our mental health or habits we want to change, relationship problems, struggles with our past, decisions we're stuck on, emotions that won't seem to shift, and these are all the visible endpoints to our current understanding of how life works. We are always doing what makes sense to us in any given moment. And fundamental shifts in our understanding mean that our behaviours change to match this. And you'll have seen this for yourself when you've responded to the same situation completely differently, depending on whether you're in a good mood or a bad mood. So once Stacey had some deep insights around the source of her stress, her experience of work and her wider life was completely transformed without her having to do anything. So also in this step, we demystify the idea of the present moment and we do a deep dive into the pivotal role that feelings play in our happiness. It's a really playful exploration, and I remember when Stacey and I were out walking in the hills going through this stuff, we laughed a lot. Okay, so after getting to grips with the mechanics, we started looking at the implications. I said earlier that this simple 4-step strategy has nothing to do with applying knowledge or techniques. The change that comes through insight. And the sheer beauty of this methodology is that when the mechanics of how we're experiencing the world click with us, then all the rest of the bits of the jigsaw fall into place of their own accord. This is when we get to have some real fun with the implications of our new understanding. So in step 3, Stacey learned how to successfully navigate the ups and downs of life. She learned all about her inbuilt psychological immune system, how we all live in separate realities, how we can enjoy deeper connections with our loved ones and our colleagues, and how we can tap into the creative component of listening. This step is great and enlightening as we get a totally different perspective on mental illness, on stress, on forgiveness, on productivity, communication, the works. And if you think back to Stacey's second breakthrough, that was a combination of getting clear on the mechanics of where feelings come from, and then instinctively seeing the implication of how we interact with others that made such a huge difference in her life. Finally, in step 4, we got to ask possibly the biggest question of them all. Who are we? And it's only natural that once we'd been through the mechanics of life, and the implications of understanding those, that we started to explore themes around self-identity, self-judgment, and self-confidence. And the big breakthrough that Stacey had from this step was really relaxing into just being herself and being okay with that. This was when her big decision didn't seem so big after all, and she had total clarity on what she wanted to do. So there we are, a bit of a gamble through the 4 steps we all take when we reconnect to health and happiness. But I hope you've seen enough to take away with you, and maybe start asking some of these questions of yourself. A final word from Stacey 1 year on. She said, "I'm so full of hope and would love for everyone to have the opportunity to know about this simple understanding, which I am truly thankful I have found." I hope this short presentation has helped you to see that whatever you're up against, you have every reason to be hopeful, and that there's much less to do than you'd imagine. There is another way to see your problems, and we all have within us exactly what's needed to reconnect to peace of mind, health, and happiness. Now, if Stacey's story really resonates with you, and you're wondering how you might go about having your own breakthroughs, there are actually a few different ways that I support people. So the next step for you is to contact me, let me know what it is you're up against, and I'll get back to you with an initial plan. And that's really easy to do. Just follow the Start Now link that you see below and take the first step by contacting me from that page. Thank you for your time. I hope to connect soon, and if not, I hope you've now got something you can take away with you that will help you to make the positive changes in your life that you want to see.